Ah, welcome to the Prophetic show. Today I'll be speaking all about prophetic discourse in Nepal. Prophetic has important role into the life of people. If we study in the historical point of view, it has played important role to reform the nations into different perspective. So if we study about the prophets that made the prophetic impact around the world, there's the two type of prophetic analysis made by the socialist. They have studied all about the prophetics into two dimensions. Prophets are the predominant supernatural characters. They have been studied about the supernatural beings. They had special ideas about equipping things. By analyzing the supernatural character, socialists were unable to distinguish, since they did not know about the backgrounds of prophets, where they are from, but they are seen in the history of Bible. They have seen into the history of Bible during the performance alone. In some books of New Testaments, prophets or apostles are not recognized. They weren't recognized who were the prophets who wrote the prophecies, who were the apostles who wrote the apostolic books. But when we study prophetic, that's the important thing to be studied, the minor prophet and major prophet. Major prophets had been seen as a supernatural characters with the divine revelations. They came into the earth with the special gift of God, special tasks they carried out, since they are the first person to direct receiving the call of God. They make conversation with the God. So that's why these peoples who have studied anthropology, sociology, were never able to accept, since this is the moment society moves under the guidance of socialists, great thinkers, educationists, into the different dimension. So they were unable to believe prophetic as a gift of God. Secondly, they started having research on the prophets for the social informations. We can study about Jonah, who came for the city of Nineveh. That's the role of Amos and so many other prophets who brought the social reformations. It is said that when there will be lacking, there will be injustice, God sends somebody as a prophet. God raised Moses for bringing liberation. That's the democratic norms and values all wanted to practice. If we do have the studied all about the communism, we do have Marxist, Leninist concept brought out in the Nepal. We do have the so many social dimension. There's so many liberations if we talk of Nepal, history tells us all about the changes made by the communist government since Nepal went through civil war for the 12-13 years. So during this civil war, they discover some sort of movement of the changes that is for the social justice. So Christians have been compared as the socialist or communist by the former Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dal and former Prime Minister Dr. Baburam Bhattarai stated there should be equal rights regarding to the rights of the Christian community. So after the democratic norms are institutionalized, after receiving democracy, there's different waves came over the nations, and so many socialists, so many social activists, so many educational experts, so many writers started to speak all about the secularism. When people institutionalize the secularism, it is one of the democratic norms and values. So it is seen the bigger discourse of prophetic movement in Nepal. Though it is not believed God as a supernatural character, though they are not believing prophetic persons as a supernatural beings, they are believing that the Christian prophets were the social activists. Christian prophets were the revolutionary persons who brought changes in the society. That's why the changes regarding the nations to bring liberations from the financial conditions. So for the characterizations, for avoiding corruptions and all sort of bravery, so there's the prophets who wants the government and the people of the society. So that's they are ready to accept these things today. So we studied about all the constitutions, the accurate prophetic and prophecies made by the prophetic person in the Old Testament. They studied about all the prophet, and they came to the conclusion that there's some sort of persons who are anointed, ordained by God, who are the prophets of nations. They have been bringing some sort of changes to bring liberation for the nations. So it is studied, it is taught, and the convert the trend of new religions, which is rooted, which we can find in the Judaism. Christianity has similarities. So they starting about the Israel. They started explaining about the defense policy of Israel. So Israelites, today the nation Israel is safe because of ordinations of God. So Israel is punished according to the biblical prophecy because of their disobedience with God. So these things are studied by the writers and great thinkers of Nepal. Today, they have been studying all these things, that the biblical prophecies are accurate and prophets are the role model for the nations. These nations need prophets, and this nation has the importance to understand the prophetics. But biblical prophecies in the context of Nepal can be role model. Biblical principles is the role model since the communist government and Christianity has common goal, common intention is to bring liberation into the people. So the former Prime Minister Pushpakamal Dal stated that Christians and the communists are similar because both of them have been struggling, and there's so many poor people's hover are flowing, according to Pushpakamal Dal stated Christians are the marginalized group and the minority group having low economic access. Some of the journalists, educational expert claims that the majority of Christian believers are Aborigine, ethnics, and the Dalits. So there's so many revelations. It is the one of the trend coming into the nations that the majority peoples who are helpless has been guiding, protecting, and the bringing into the some sort of social institution. That's the churches. Churches are the agent to socialize the needy people. So in terms of the social perspective, Christians are doing well. So the biblical prophecies and the prophets can be the role model to show the example. Since if we study in the Old Testament, there's so many prophets raised by the God in the Israel life. When corruptions were going on, when some sort of disorders in the nations was going on. So biblical prophecies has important role to shape the nations into the democratic norms and values. So when monarch abuses the rights, when monarch takes over the peoples, so God sent somebody as a prophet, as Saint Moses was sent for the spiritual liberations. This is the example, role model that brought the awakening for the nations. So these things has the important role. Biblical prophets has important role for the for institutionalizing the democratic norms and value in the nations. Another point is prophetic witness is needed for the present democracies. Present democracy talks of all the rule made by the people, for the people, and by the people, to the people. So democratic norms and values is some sort of freedom in the practice in terms of religions. Since the cultural pluralism is one of the democratic norms and values, there's the biggest number of people following other religions, whereas Christian religion is the minority, and the minority group in terms of numbers. So Christian peoples in the nations has no more access for institutionalizing the democratic norms and values. But the prophetic witness is needed so that the prophetic witness can bring some sort of change and liberations for practicing the democracy. So if we studied about the democratic nations all over the world, they have important thing is the freedom in terms of practicing the religions. So Nepal, to be the best example, to make best example widespread assumption is to make any sort of free from any sort of discriminations in terms of religion. So this is the role model that the other countries is going to talk of Nepal. So that's why Nepal has been institutionalizing the democratic norms and values by giving equalities in the practices in terms of religion. But some sort of article has brought controversy, since in one article it is said there is the equality in practicing any religion since nation has been declared as a secular state. In other words, there's the no permissions for converting people in other religion by luring, by guiding, by showing some sort of profit or benefits. So it is exactly right things, since there's no permissions to lure somebody into certain religion, but in terms of their belief and the trust, in terms of their aspirations, in terms of their assumption, they can follow any religion. That article declares, that article clarifies that the importance and necessity of converts. So one of the socialists has stated in social media, there has been tremendous changes in terms of practicing their religions. There hasn't been any dominant religion established for the era, since one of the wave around the world in terms of social science is the convert or the changes in the practice of religions. So one of the major things explained by the writers, social activists who studied anthropology and social science, she has stated that there should be no restrictions in the convert regarding to the religion, since it is the social transformation, it is the one sort of spontaneous process to be converted into certain religion, into certain religions. So that's what we studied, that's what we see the social movement in the Nepal. Though they do not believe prophetic discourse as the powerful source of information from the God, though they do not believe prophetics are the major things to be changed into the nation, but they have been analyzing in the social perspective. That's the good things, prophetic witness needed in the present democratic nations, since Nepal has been institutionalizing the democracy in this decade. Let's talk about impact of prophecies in the social activities and the other sectors. So if we talk about the prophetic impact, we have seen the major changes taken place. There's the two groups in terms of Christian denominations. We have seen prophetic denomination and non-prophetic denominations. So recently, before a year, one video went viral. There was one pastor named Keshav Acharya. He was arrested for prophesying, making the fake miracles. Though it was explained in the negative way, he was arrested by the government, and the people filed the case. So this discourse brought the negative impact in the prophetic, though this discourse has been analyzed by the Christian organization in the national level. Christians federations, they were not agree that the things like a prophetic to be spread in the nation, since there is more numbers of peoples are from the evangelical and the Presbyterian group rather than the prophetic group. Since prophetic denominations are the pre-denominational churches in terms of numbers is in the less number. So the supporter of prophetic believers are less, and there's no more expert who can advocate about prophetic and who can explain about the importance of prophetic in the nations. Though there is in several prophets like the Simon Tomata, Amos Himan, and the prophet T.B. Joseph, and other prophets in Nepal, there's always the controversy brought up in the Christian social medias. They are not ready to accept prophetic dimension into the nations. They are not ready to believe, and they are not ready to accept the prophetic changes, prophetic moment in the nations. They are still supporting on the orthodoxy church members who had the evangelical background, who have the other side of denominational background. So the prophetic media is not enough access to boost up the prophetic for the nations. But though there is importance, that the negative impact, though there is negative impact, it has made some sort of discourse that prophetic should be studied and analyzed and institutionalized and to brought up with the growth, spiritual growth, and some sort of assumption. So if we talk about the prophetic, God always brought up new prophets for the nation when there will be corruption. So when there will be abuse of authority. So prophetic persons always are revolutionary. They are intended to bring some sort of change inside the churches. Since Jesus had the important role for temple cleansing, there were some sort of negative activities. There was some sort of disorder going on inside the community, though they are believing in the God. So Jewish peoples were rejected by Jesus since he wanted some sort of revelation. So prophet, as a savior himself, the Messiah of the world, he brought some sort of changes in prophetic dimension. So in this way, Nepal has been reformed into the prophetic dimension. They have been bringing up the new prophet for the nations so that some sort of breakthrough can be brought up with the nations. So here we do have the social impact. It has brought the social order. They are fearing with the God. They are fearing with the prophet. So there will be less chances of committing mistakes, committing error, or there's the less chances of authority abuse in case of having impact or discourse on the prophetics. When we believe on prophetics, so that's the social activities that has been promoting nations, like the charitable works, providing the goods and supplies for the needy peoples. These are the waves of prophetic moment. The prophets are helping for the nations, helping for the needy people in the nations, so in the prophetic dimension. So we can see several videos in the social medias that the prophetic persons like prophetess Mariam Rai visiting the several marginalized tribes like the Chepang community for providing goods and other necessity to meet the needs of daily life. So if we study about the social impact of prophetic in the nations. So politicians and the socialists has recognized the Christianity in terms of prophetic dimension. So though there is the biggest things that has brought by the missionaries, by United Mission to Nepal and other social institutions, NGOs and the INGOs, they have been putting trust on the prophetic, since there were the clean peoples who were standing as a prophet for the nations in the Old Testament. So likewise, we need to study the perspective of prophetic education in Nepal. Today, if we educate people in terms of prophecies, if we institutionalize prophetic as a mass movement, there's some sort of views of politicians or the government. They are not supposed to prophesy about nations, politicians. It can bring issues, but it should be done only for the community as such. They are not supposed to talk of the nations or the group. Rather, they are supposed to bring some sort of changes inside the nation. That is the social point of views expressed by the socialists and the politicians and the educationists. But today we need to understand, if we did have the prophetic practices made, there can be the drastic change in the socialization in terms of making better citizens for the nations, for bringing some sort of liberation for the nations, and for bringing boosting up for the prosperity, financial empowerment, and the motivations for the nations. So the prophetics has the important perspective for the Nepal. God bless you.